Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. This is a new episode of INFJ Thoughts in which I'll be talking about the question of childhood and adolescence for an INFJ. There's a person in the comments to one of my more recent videos who was talking about um, childhood and suggesting that it might be an interesting theme to tackle. And I agreed. I thought it might be interesting to discuss this theme. Um, so again, I will be referring mostly to my example, the example of my childhood, and how that's just expanded through time until now. Um, I would say that I was always a relatively reserved person. Though I did have a less reserved phase, I think, which was a bit of a reaction against my more reserved first phase of childhood and adolescence. My 20s, I would say, yeah, throughout the majority of my 20s, most of my 20s, I was less reserved and more assertive. Um, and I think this has remained at this point, but it has turned into something a little more stable, a little more comfortable, something that's not a projection of a desire to be the opposite of what one used to be. When I was a child, I was very sensitive. Well, always been very sensitive. It's a constant, very emotional. I was very sensitive, needing affection. I think I was a child who needed affection, and a child who tended towards being upset by rejection too. I think it's also due to certain dynamics in my family background, which perhaps at some point I will talk about in the video, but I don't think I will enter into too much detail in this video. But I had a bit of a complicated relationship with my dad, who was not always the best at making me feel loved, even though he did love me, even though he does love me, but he was very stressed during my childhood because he had issues with his professional situation, and he found it very stressful, and his own family history is a bit messed up. So he's shown me mixed signals, and I suffered from it for a long time. I have a good relationship with him, but it wasn't always easy. And I feel like my mum, who loves me and my brother more than anything else in the world, I mean, not to bring in the typology too much, but she's an FI dominant, and I just feel like in certain instances it would have been better for me to just have more obvious displays of affection. Overall, like, my parents, I'm lucky enough to have parents who love me, and I do not blame them for having been bad parents or anything. Every situation is new and complex. But I was always a little bit emotionally effectively insecure, I would say. And from a young age, I was hyper emotional, hyper empathic, I would say. But to the extent that it's like almost like I grew to defenses, especially during my adolescence. I grew defenses that became a little bit too rough in my 20s. And the process of making them softer again, more malleable again, more allowing, blending with other people. It's a process that took place maybe in my late 20s and more recently, and corresponded with the process of self-discovery that involved, among other things, the the discovery of my type, and yeah, like that's played a role for sure. But I grew defenses when I was a child because I just was too emotional, too easily hurt by things. You know, my my brother is an INFP, and he also, I think, grew a lot of defenses. I'm not sure that he has allowed himself to lower them as much as I have, but what I always remember and what was quite striking at the time, uh, not that it was particularly reassuring to my mom, was that me and my brother, we had a tendency to be so, I don't know if the word is empathic in this case, but we felt things so strongly that sometimes people could describe a scene, and if it was a scene that was very violent or graphic or sad or something, often my brother and I had simultaneous reactions that could be quite extreme. One of them being fainting. So that used to scare our mother a lot, because there were many instances up until up until maybe age 12 or something, or yeah, easily 12, 13, where I'd be told a story about, there's one that I'd always remember, someone who was skateboarding and kind of crashed into barbed wire, a barbed wire fence, and it was in Austria, and we were on holidays, and someone was talking about that accident and saying that you could see the bone in the leg. Sorry if this is disgusting, by the way. Anyway, my brother and I fainted at the exact same time when we heard that. So this is to give you an idea of just how emotional and sensitive we were, and I think just how vivid our imagination was probably didn't help. And so but I guess in this case I'll just talk about my own experience. I had to deal with this hypersensitivity, from a young age, and always have had, and it really followed me throughout life. It's only more recently that I've managed to channel it a bit more. In my adolescence, when I went to school, and I could get very, very stressed, very nervous about exams, about things like that. It actually prevented me from probably doing as well as I would have if I had been a little bit more in control. I did well, I was always a good pupil, but I always felt like I was impeded by something about my lack of calm coming from emotion, So it took me a long time to sort of try to channel that, and sometimes by means that to me now seemed a bit artificial, seems like an attempt at repressing what I guess was a manifestation of my FE. Because I was good at most things in school. I was not bad at anything except arts, just drawing and stuff. I was terrible at that. Music, I was not good at that either. But I was good at literature, I was good at maths, physics, science, languages, It's pretty free to pick whatever I wanted to pick, and by the end of high school I decided to study English and history and then philosophy. So more toward the arts and social sciences rather than hard science, hard science was just not something I wanted to do. I was not into that enough to want to study it. Around that time, I moved to Ireland, and leaving France for Ireland helped me, because Marseille society is quite it's quite demanding with men, I find, especially if you're like an INFJ man in the making. Marseille society, South France, it tends to reward men who are very outwardly confident and cocky, and not to generalize, but that's the impression I get. and extroverted and assert their personality, you know, and I guess it wasn't so much my case, so I felt I felt overwhelmed and like I couldn't really blossom. And going to Ireland for my university studies was very helpful. It helped me develop, you know, a good level of English, but it also allowed me to assert myself more, because Irish people tend to not be at all like Southern French people. They have one point in common, which is that they're warm. Southern French people are warm. They're very hospitable, and they will manifest warmth in a quite direct way. And Irish people also are. And Irish people are also very open, and I'd say like there's a lot of feelers in Irish society, and that just helped me, I guess. And so, paradoxically, instead of just accepting my feeler side then in Irish society, I don't know why I did that, but it's almost like I took advantage of the fact that now I was surrounded by feelers to sort of try to embrace more of this like French attitude that I was trying to, and I had managed to emancipate myself from by moving abroad. It's almost like I was enjoying a delayed form of assertiveness that was a bit artificial, you know, because for all the difficulty that I had experienced in Marseille, I'd still had been trained to adopt a Marseille attitude in a way, so I had this thickness of skin and this vague facade of confidence that Irish people didn't really have, you know, because there's no Marseille in Ireland. And for some reason I was enjoying this delayed gratification of asserting myself in a way that was not completely natural, in a way that wasn't completely myself, you know, and made me someone who appeared often like a tea person, and could appear sometimes a little too strong-willed, but in a, you know, in an exaggerated sense, or even a little bit callous at times. And I can tell you that at the time, if I had taken the test, I probably would have gotten like 75% on tea. So much was I convinced that that's what I was, and I might even have gotten extroverted. Although I never was extroverted, but you know, when you live in Ireland, and if you're interested in like socializing in Ireland, living the Irish life, the Dublin life in that instance, you're going to be going out and you're going to be having beer, and I guess like the drunk or inebriated version of me was more extroverted, so I was easily relating that back to, you know, to the extroversion. That was not a natural form of extroversion because I never was extroverted, but yeah. So it's almost like I had been resentful about the fact of not being able to impose myself in like French society. Never really been able to attract the attention of women when I was younger, and somehow I got this sense that like I could be that, but in Ireland with a society that actually fitted me more. But I decided to, you know, take it as a springboard towards not becoming alpha, but, you know, acting out what I had not been allowed to act out before. And as I progressed throughout my years in Ireland, I became a little more sensible, and I became a little more in touch with my feelings. You know, I still have up to this day like a lot of wonderful Irish friends, and I would say that like most of the time I was quite a likable person, but not always. In any case, I remained very sensitive, but under that T mask. And, you know, this also corresponds to the tertiary functions development, which is supposed to be during your 20s and 30s. And for me, that really appeared that way. You know, like that's also when my TI became more obvious. Up until then, like I could easily have come across as an INFP, always type 4, always feeling quite different from my emotional side, from the fact that I had all these original, or I felt to be original thoughts I put to paper. You know, I started writing poetry at 16, and I've been writing since, like, you know, ever since the age of 16. I've been writing a lot: poetry, plays, like drama, I wrote a novel also more recently. Now I'm working on philosophical notebooks. So over time, you can see that I started with poetry, and I became more and more rational in some way, you know. And I think that's partly comes from the influence of the TI developing in me, and me taking advantage of the development of that TI to assert myself in ways that were not always natural, because it's almost like I made the TI sort of supplant the FE in my stack, leading to, under the surface of that confidence in our society, a great dose of stress and insecurity and dissatisfaction with myself still, you know. I've not come to that self-acceptance that I think is more the case now that I've sort of allowed the FE to come back to the front, well, behind NI, but and feeling much more confident now because I'm accepting myself more. But the acceptance, and also the reason why the INFJ discovery is so significant to me, is that it symbolizes something that is so much more than just like the INFJ. It symbolizes this period of understanding why I was so empathic and emotional. I think it has a lot to do with NI and FE, you know. And this also this difficulty in asserting myself, which then transitioned into this ability to do it more and to rely more on my sort of coding rational side, corresponding with the development of TI, and then sort of seeing it all in perspective and saying, okay, like TI is strong in me and it's good, I like it because that helps me in a lot of situations intellectually and in many other contexts. But at the same time, FE is even more natural to me in some sense. It's auxiliary rather than tertiary, and so let it come back to the forefront now. You know, operate with FE, live within TI, operate with FE, rationalize with TI, and the INFJ model just made me realize that like my life just made more sense in that way, and so I achieved a form of alignment that I had been looking for from the beginning, probably, you know. And so the self-acceptance in a genuine sense, not in a superficial sense, I think became effective or started happening only in the last few years, and it's a very pleasant process, and the INFJ type matters to me because of that and because of the way in which I can associate it with the way that my life unfolded and how it has gotten better in that respect, at least. And I feel like if I had that experience as a person, well, there are probably other INFJs who will have similar-ish experiences, and it might be good for them to benefit from that hindsight that I can provide, being probably a little older than a lot of other INFJs who follow me or who follow other people on YouTube, for instance. And just sharing my experience might be helpful, and to me, it's also a way to continue expressing FE and enjoy that very much, you know. So so it's probably also partly why I make YouTube videos. It's not really because I like to talk about myself. It's because I feel like in talking about myself, I connect with other people who have personality traits in common with me, and therefore who are likely to have had life experiences in common with me and who will be able to relate. And the knowledge that in talking I relate is attractive to me. If it was just talking, it would not be as attractive. So yeah, it's kind of how my life was, you know, always highly intuitive, very much intuitive feeler up until my late teens, more of like an intuitive thinker, but kind of not completely naturally so in my 20s, and now sort of, I wouldn't say retreating back to intuitive feeling, but like you know, aligning my sort of traits and strengths towards intuitive feeling with a heavy dose of thinking, which if you look at the INFJ stack, that's pretty much what it is. And so yeah, that's kind of my perspective on my development as an INFJ. It's been very rambly. I'm sorry, guys. I hope it won't be too painful to follow, and I hope I've been honest with myself enough. I'm sure there'll be a lot more to talk about, but I'm just aware that this video is now nearly 20 minutes, so I'll probably stop here, and you know, I'm sure I'll have other opportunities to talk about this topic, yeah, like at some later point. So if you want to share your own experiences in the comments, it would be great. Have a great day, and we'll be talking to you soon. See you guys.